purpose of this exercise is to complete a DMV pre-trip test on all Class B vehicles. Okay, we'll be starting today at the front of the coach. First thing you do is you check the light bar on the top of the coach, make sure all the lights are intact, all the covers are good, not cracked or broken. Next thing you do is you look underneath the coach, see if there's any puddles. That'll identify any hoses or leaks that might cause a problem. Next thing we do is we go up to the wipers, make sure they're intact. The wipers are intact and mounted securely and in place. We also look at the mirrors just from this side to make sure they're firmly attached to the coach, which they are. We're going to open up the hood. This is a trucker's latch right here. I have to get on the other side and do the same thing, which will allow me to open the hood. Pulling that back, you mount from the front, both hands on the front, and this will come up. It is on a hinge and a bungee, but be careful and let it come and set. Now what we're going to do is perform a fluids check. We are going to look inside this area here and identify the transmission stick, which is red, and the yellow stick, which is oil, filler area. Okay, then we're going to move up and identify the master cylinder. We're going to identify where you put oil in, which is right there. We're going to identify our coolant reservoir, our power steering reservoir, which is in the normal range. Okay. The power steering pump is right in this area right here. It's a hydro belt driven pump. Okay, and that's very critical. You have to make that analysis. Okay, we're going to drop down to our pitman arm, which is right here, and the torsion bar, which is right in this general area here. Identify there's no cracks, anything broken or defective. We're going to get to the front springs right here. You cannot have more than a quarter of the springs missing from the original shackle. We want to make sure our bolts, our 4 bolts down here on the frame, are intact. The U-bolts and all 4 bolts are tight and nothing frayed, broken, or disabled. We want to make sure our shock is in place, which you can see right there. It's a vertical stud there. Make sure it's securely mounted to the frame. And there's a top and bottom bolt. You can see the bottom bolt down there, top bolts under the shroud. We're going to come in from the back side here, and we're going to identify the brake drum. We're going to look in here and make sure there's no cracks, defects, welds, and it's safe to operate. We're going to follow the brake line. If you can look right here, you got to identify this is the brake line coming in. Make sure that that is firmly attached at the top and at the drum. Okay. Now we're moving to the front side of the brake drum. Looking through the inspection plate here, you may or may not be able to see it, but you have to identify the brake rotor, the brake linings, which are the pads. They cannot be less than 1/4 of an inch or 50% of their operating value. Looking through this inspection hole, you can see that. You may not be able to see it, but I can see it. Okay, cut for a second. Now I'm going to identify the lug nuts are securely tightened. Major thing with lug nuts, no rust around here or welds or cracks. As I move through the lug nuts, I want to make sure that my wheel hub, if I took my hubcap off, there's a wheel hub right in the center of the axle here. I want to make sure my oil seal's intact and the fluid. There's a fluid mark right there, but we must identify that as drivers. Okay, now we're going to get into what we call ICD, which is inflation. This tire right here must be inflated to 95 pounds cold at all times, and the critical measurement is cold. The condition of the tire, you're looking at the front wall, cracks, defects, punctures. You're also looking at the back wall, and you want to make sure that tire's in good condition. And then the depth on a front tire is 4/32. There's measurement tools, but you got to have at least a minimum on the fronts of 4/32. You cannot have a retread on the front of a commercial Class B vehicle. And now we're on the passenger side on the top view, and there's some things here that we want to look at that are very important. The first thing is you might be able to look in here behind the alternator and look at the exhaust manifold is securely mounted. You may or not be able to see it, but you have to reference it. It's right behind here. You're looking to make sure there's nothing hanging there, no loose bolts or no flanges exposed. The air cleaner box is right here, securely mounted and secure. The fan is in good working condition, and we have to assume that it is in the running condition. We don't have the fan working, but it's right in this shroud right here. The radiator is mounted to the frame. And then we start looking at all hoses to make sure they're securely mounted, they're clamped, there's no puddles or no leaks. The alternator is mounted securely to the frame. The water pump is right next to the alternator, and the AC pump is right next to the alternator. It's right here. This is a belt-driven vehicle with a serpentine belt. It's very critical that you mention that, and that you can not have more than 3/4 inch of play on that belt. Make sure everything's mounted to the frame and to the engine block securely. Okay, we're gonna work the passenger tire area, which is the same as the driver's area. Just a quick summary. You want to make sure your springs are good, your shocks mounted, your brake lines are intact, your rim and brake cylinder is good. Moving back over, you want to do your ICD, which is inflation, 95 pounds, condition of the tire, and then your depth, 4/32. You want to look inside your inspection plate, make sure your linings are good, your brake rotors are intact. Same thing with lug nuts, no rust, no loose lug nuts. Then we would also identify the hub seal and the hub oil. And that completes our front end. So the engine compartment part of this pre-test is done. I'm going to do just the opposite as I did earlier. I'm going to reach over, hold onto the hood, drop it down. I'm going to come and close my hasp. This is very important because this will vibrate. It's a semi-truck hasp. Coming on over. Okay. Here we go. Okay, now we're resuming on the entry door cab on the passenger side. You must make sure your door opens and closes freely. You want to make sure that your seat is mounted and moves freely. You want to make sure your handrail is intact, right here. You want to make sure that your mirror is securely mounted to the frame, no broken glass. You want to make sure that your door is hinged and intact. You want to make sure there's no safety situations in the glass and it's intact. Now we're at the external part of the cab. We want to make sure that the passenger entry door, the double door, is in good functioning condition, that the lights are intact, and that it does operate, which it should. And as you can see from the manual part, it does. So we make sure we're good there. Okay, as we follow the cab, I'm looking to make sure all my lights are intact, no broken lenses. The dually part of the coach, which is the back end, dually meaning 2 rims, 2 tires. What we're going to do first off is we're going to check the mud flap, make sure it's intact, cannot be dragging the ground, or short enough that it's not functional. That's perfect right there. We need to make sure in a dual situation that we have no spacers between the rims. You can look through the inspection plate and see that, or be able to at least identify it. From back to front, we got to make sure that the rims are both securely mounted and they're working properly, that there's no welds or cracks or defects. We look underneath in here, it's hard to see, but there's a torsion bar that goes along the frame. We have to make sure that that's in good working condition mounted to the frame. Behind the dually, you can't see it, but I'm going to give it to you in audio. The airbags are working with no leaks, and that the coach is level and everything's mounted to the frame. There is a vertical shock that's mounted to the frame back here, and you want to make sure that that's mounted and secure also. The drive shaft, you might be able to get the drive shaft through here. It's down there. There's a exhaust pipe, okay, and a drive shaft. You want to make sure that that's securely mounted, nothing's hanging or causing any safety issues whatsoever. The frame and the rear end shackle bolts are also underneath here, and you just want to make sure that that's functional and working also. We still need to complete our ICD on all tires, which is inflation, 95 pounds, the condition of the tire, the external wall and the internal wall, and then the depth. The rear depth can be 2/32 minimum for DMV purposes, and you can run retreads on the back. Unlike the front, has to be new tires at a minimum of 4/32.